Hey, everybody. Hey, Facebook. Hey, YouTube. I'm Dan over there. That's our director, Dr. Rachel Owen. Hi, Rachel. I hope it's better weather there in Columbia than it is in Tennessee.
It's not raining yet,
Cool.
but it's looking a little gloomy outside.
Okay. All right. Well, that's Friday for you. I hope that upbeat music got you ready for our Facebook live chat today. It always makes me want to dance. Before we get to that, I do kind of want to show everybody something. The vaccine equity roundtables coming up at the end of the month. We've got the mayor of Jefferson City involved. We got researchers from UMKC involved. We got representatives from Missouri Foundation for Health. We're going to be talking about the push for equitable vaccine distribution for all Missourians. So come join up, be a part of that. One way you can do that is by going to our website, mostpolicyinitiative.com. And I hope this is working here. If you go to Local Science Engagement Network, scroll down to Science Policy Workshops, give that a click, and then you can see like all our programming here, and we've got links to sign up for everything. So make sure you go ahead and do that. And without further ado, let's bring in some of our esteemed guests, Dr. Jenny Bratburd and Dr. Elleny Bickle. Good afternoon, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. And today we're going to be talking about prescribed burning here in Missouri, and also a biodiesel mandate.
Yeah, and I just want to give a shout out to Elleny today. She's joining us from across the world over in Greece. So it's really late where she's at, but we're really excited that she was able to be with us today. But yeah, I think
initiatives truly worldwide.
We are. But I'm excited for today. I think, both of these issues are important, especially to farmers and landowners across the state of Missouri. And so that's why we kind of lumped them together. And they're also both seeing some movement in the General Assembly this week. And so I guess it doesn't too much matter which one we start with, but maybe we can start with the prescribed burning, and maybe Dr. Bratberg can get us started with that and what that looks like in Missouri, what that bill is all about.
Sure. Okay. So prescribed burning is a practice of burning a landscape on purpose to avoid uncontrollable wildfires, and also to help with wildlife and plants that sort of need periodic burning to grow better. And so this is a practice that's done in many other states, and especially common in the West, where they have more wildfires. And one of the reasons, so this bill is in place to clarify about who is liable for these fires. So what that ends up looking like is, right now, if you do a prescribed burn, there's no way to get insurance for that. There's not a lot of resources on doing these burns, I guess. And so by having this law to limit liability, to say, okay, as long as you're doing the correct practices to make sure that it doesn't spread, that you're taking care to avoid damage, that you're keeping it in a certain zone, and you're doing this safely, then you should be able to do that. And you should be able to get insurance to do that, to cover anything that comes up. And so that's kind of why this bill is in place, is going through, because many other states have rules about what kind of liability there is for prescribed burns, which enables farmers or whoever's managing the land to do these burns and have insurance, and to better do it more safely. But in Missouri, we don't really have any of that in law. And so this is going to help clarify things to allow those burns to happen. So I don't know. Let me know if you have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And if anybody has any questions, there's the comment section right below this video. So make sure you type them in there and we'll get to them. Dr. Bratberg, one thing that struck me as I was researching a blog I was recently writing, according to Climate Central, there are some 220,000, 250,000 Missourians who may be at risk of forest fires. So I imagine maybe they want to hear policymakers talk about how prescribed burning works and what's being done to keep them safe from fires spreading beyond where they're supposed to go.
Yeah, so prescribed burns, like the important thing with prescribed burns is that you can control it, as opposed to just having an uncontrollable fire started randomly, during a bad time. With prescribed burns, there's sets of protocols. You want to make sure that you're doing it at a safe time, that the weather's going to permit, that it's not too dry. You can sort of burn around to make sure it's contained in a certain area, to be checking that. And there's a lot that goes into planning that kind of fire versus for an uncontrolled wildfire. I mean, by its name alone, is wild. It's uncontrolled. It has the potential to be very damaging, to spread to places that you really don't want it to spread, and to put people in harm's way. And so being able to do prescribed fires is a practice that helps avoid uncontrollable fires. And that's generally what people are talking about with that. In Missouri, I don't think we see as much of the sort of enormous wildfires as in the West, but it is still a useful tool, and also, helpful for sort of rejuvenating the landscape, clearing out kind of some of the bushier plants and enabling more things to grow, and potentially helping with biodiversity.
So one of the things that when I was listening to the testimony, and Dr. Bickle, I think that you might have testified on this bill when it was heard, and so maybe you could answer this. But I think, if you're just a farmer who's going out to burn, not a huge amount of liability unless you let it get out of control and it burns down your neighbor's barn or something like that. Hopefully that's not happening. But who this really impacts, this bill, would be people who do prescribed burning as, their job, who have, a license. I don't know if it's a license, but who are actually like going out and trying to perform this work on a regular basis. And they're having a lot of trouble getting insurance, or insurance is really expensive for their business. Could you touch a little more on that?
Yeah, thanks for asking that, Dr. Owen. I did want to mention that I did want to mention a few details about the bills. This bill was out of the Rural Community Development Committee at the House, which is my favorite committee. It kind of combines agricultural issues, rural development, rural wealth, and all sorts of economic development issues. So on your question, Dr. Owen, to use the legislator's words, he said that farmers and the prescribed burns managers at the moment do not have anything at place. They don't have any legislation. They don't have rules for liability. They don't have requirements for the prescribed burns. They don't have nothing. So based on the testimonies and based on some communications that we had when we were writing the science note with Dr. Bratberg, what we know for the moment is that there are no current plans that a manager can get for insurance. That means that basically every time you have a prescribed burn, you basically are uninsured. You don't know what the risk is. You don't know what's going to happen and who has the liability. So as Dr. Bratberg mentioned, there is research that shows that the more prescribed burns you have, especially if there's a plan with that prescribed burn, and if there's somebody who's experienced to do those burns, the less chances you have to have uncontrolled wildfires. And I do want to mention that we have on our website the science note that we wrote with Dr. Bratberg. So anybody who's interested in learning more about it, please go on our website and read a little bit about it. In our science note, we also mentioned the federal costs associated with prescribed burnings that are significantly lower than the costs associated with suppressing fires. And these wildfires are largely prevented by prescribed burnings.
Okay, so one more question I have to ask, and it really came from Dan, I think, when we started talking about this topic, is he was talking about how when they do the prescribed burning in the Flint Hills in eastern Kansas, that it tends to impact the air quality in Kansas City. And so, I think, there's some concern with prescribed burning that it's going to have negative impacts on air quality. Can you talk a little bit about how this bill, I know they had lots of conversations about this during the testimony, so how would this bill sort of address that potential challenge?
So to be honest, I can take that, Dr. Bratberg. To be honest, I don't think there is any mention in the bill currently that talks about that. The bill does two things. One, it defines liability and negligence. So it basically says that the landowner or whoever is an agent to do that prescribed burn is not going to be held accountable unless they're negligent. And what they mean by being negligent is that if the person who is doing the fire, the prescribed burn, is found to be to not be prudent or reasonable or careful when they prescribe this burn under similar, as they would be under similar circumstances. So, as the legislator mentioned in the testimony when he was describing the bill, this is kind of the first step. So all these concerns that I know you're referring to, the one at the Senate, I think somebody raised this question, what do you do when you have all kinds of different difficulties and challenges that come up when you actually apply this bill into a law and into practice. But I think that's going to be something that we're going to be seeing over the course of time. Similar things are going to be coming up, and potentially similar legislation is going to be coming up as well to address those kind of challenges.
And I'd like to point out that one of our jobs here is to help elevate the voice of science in policy discussions here. So if anybody out there is researching public health or researching, the biodiversity gains associated with prescribed burns, by all means, head to MissouriLSEN.quorum.us, sign up for our newsletter, and we share with you all the time opportunities for you to share your science with policymakers and opportunities to write science notes on these kinds of topics. I wonder, is there an appropriate time coming up where scientists from around Missouri can share some relevant information on these topics?
So I think for this bill in particular, so it's been heard, I think it's been heard in both chambers. And so now the next step would be that it has to go to the floor in both chambers. Jenny and Elleny, maybe you are more up to speed on exactly where this bill sits. And are they considering the House bill or the Senate bill? Which one's moving forward?
So the Senate bill was assigned to the Senate Agriculture and Food and Outdoor Resources Committee, and it was voted out of it, and then it's been perfected, but it hasn't been yet, as far as I know, last I checked, it hasn't been yet discussed at the House floor or assigned anywhere. So we're talking about the House bill, which was filed by Representative Tim Taylor. And that one moved, as I said earlier, it was assigned first to the Rural Community Development, then it went to the House Rules and Administration Laws Committee, and then now it was heard at the Senate Ag Committee this week. So yeah, the House one is the one that is moving forward for the moment.
Yeah, so what I think, Dan, to answer your question, so lawmakers are still considering this. So regardless of where you live in the state, this is probably going to be something that comes up in the floor, whether on the Senate floor or in the House floor. And so if you're interested in this topic and have some science information you'd like to share with your elected officials, reach out, because this is something that's going to be on their minds here in the next few weeks.
Yeah, I'd like to remind everybody that we have tools to do that at MissouriLSEN.quorum.us. We put the link down there in the chat. Just log on there, sign up for our email, and as long as you put your home address into the box there on the screen, we can actually connect you by email to your local representatives and give you the tools to be able to share some of your science with them that way. Is it time to change gears yet, Rachel? Should we start talking about the biodiesel mandate?
Yeah, you can't let me ask these questions. I'll ask too many questions, but I think this is a great time to switch over and talk about biodiesel mandates. And so, Dr. Bickle, why don't you give us the overview here?
So I don't know if you're a really devoted follower of MOST, but this is something that Dan and I talked about in the beginning of the session, and it's the House Bill 529. This bill is one of the bills that you do not see a companion bill at the Senate. Even though there's similar fuel-related bills, this is kind of unique. It's called the Missouri, the Biodiesel Mandate, and it also starts the Missouri Made Fuels Act. Since we talked about it, it has had as well a lot of hearings, a lot of testimonies. It has moved out from 3 committees now, including the one at the Senate. It was also heard this week at the same committee at the Senate, at the Ag Committee, it was assigned first to the House Agriculture Policy Committee, and then to the House Administrative or Legislative Laws. And then since that time, it has had many substitutes and many different additions to it and changes. So I'm going to just give a little bit of overview of the things that the bill is currently saying. So as I said, the House Bill 529 creates the Missouri Made Fuels Act. And what it means is that starting from April 2023, we're going to have all the diesel that is being sold or offered for sale in our state to have to contain at least 5% of biodiesel content in it. And then after March 31st, 2024, it's going to have 10%. So after April 1st, 2024, we're going to have every diesel that you're going to be finding in Missouri, it's going to have a 10% biodiesel content in it. Now, the bill has a sunset date after 10 years. And then the other change that we see in the current state of the bill is that the mandate is only going to apply to specific months. So I think it's going to start from May and all the way to September. And I think one of the reasons why this was a change to the bill, I think because the bill handler noticed that people were concerned about the biodiesel freezing in their vehicles, which is something that some people raised as a concern from the Minnesota case study because they already have a mandate in their state. So that's kind of like one of the changes that Representative Hafner made to the bill. Now, just to give also a little bit of background on biodiesel, because we also have a science note on this. That's something that we do here. So feel free to, again, go to our website and visit the science note on biodiesel mandate. Biodiesel is burning substantially cleaner than other petroleum-based diesel fuels. It also helps Missouri, but also the U.S. with oil independence, but also the local economy. A mandate of this kind would potentially, probably increase the demand for biofuels in general. And this could also lead for the increase of the farm income in Missouri. Now, one of the things that we also mentioned in our science note and was also mentioned a lot in the debates over the bill was, since it is a mandate, there are quite a few things going on whenever you put mandates in place in an economy, because normally you have the demand and the supply on a commodity that kind of like work together in a perfect equilibrium. It doesn't exist, but nearly perfect equilibrium tends to sit in a commodity. Because this is a mandate, we may have dead weight losses, as we economists call it. What that means is that somebody will have to incur these economic inefficiencies, and it is likely that the consumer and the end user might have to pay the price for this mandate.
You answered almost all of the questions that I was going to ask you. I think this is a really interesting bill. I know that this was our first science note that we might have published this spring.
It was. I think so.
It was something that we were told was going to be really important. It was really important last year, has had a lot of support this year. It's got a lot of, the agricultural industry in the state is really supportive of this. Something that I think is like, it's hard to talk about the nuance of, how biofuels in general contribute to climate change. whether they, they burn cleaner in a combustion engine, but, there's also these trade-offs with land use that we have to consider in that as well. So I was wondering if maybe, and Jenny, if you want to answer this one too, with biodiesel or, ethanol, biofuels in general, kind of what should we be considering when we think about how they mitigate or, cause greenhouse gas emissions?
Right. So there's a lot to consider. One thing, like you mentioned, is the land use, which is kind of unique for biofuels because you're using arable land that could be used for, food or something, and instead you're using it for production of energy ultimately. And that's kind of a sort of one of the broader concerns of, how does that affect, food prices? Is this going to be efficient enough? And along with that, there's the energy concerns of how much energy goes into growing up these crops. And then there's a question of, is this the best way to manage this issue compared to other fuel sources? So compared to any petroleum-based product, it's obviously going to be cleaner than that. But there's other potential technologies that might help reduce carbon dioxide emissions from the transportation sector. So one of the this is a conversation going on with federal policy more, is like electrification. So moving towards more electric vehicles and shifting the power grid to provide electricity with renewable resources. So that's sort of an alternative approach here. So I think, one of the advantages for biofuels is that, and for this in particular, is it's kind of more immediate. You just are increasing the biodiesel content. Versus electrification, there's a lot of pieces that are going to have to go into that. Which one, is better for the environment in the long term, and is kind of going to depend on the feasibility and cost and everything, and of course the land management issue too. So I think it's pretty complex, and I imagine these are going to be existing side by side for some time. I think we talked here at some point before, Elleny probably talked about this, of what types of crops get used, because, I think biodiesel is focused on certain crops right now, but for biofuels in general, like one alternative is using the parts of plants that aren't used for food and stuff like that. So there's these potential technology innovations that could really change what kind of energy sources we're using in the future, and they all tend to come with certain trade-offs.
Yeah, I think that's a good. I think that's a good summary. Yeah, the complexity of it.
I think it's a really interesting topic to talk about. We have most car manufacturers pledging to go fully electric in the next 10 or 15 years anyway. So I wonder if it might be just a moot point, to make a biodiesel mandate, if people would be able to buy diesel engines in the future. Probably they'll be around for some other things, but for maybe diesel trucks may not exist 10, 15 years down the road. We don't know. I think what's also interesting is, Missouri is kind of at an energy crossroads. If you think about it, we have wind power up to the north. In Iowa, certainly there's a bunch of wind power. In Kansas is also known as a big oil producing state, a big natural gas producing state. And here we are, Missouri, right in the middle of that. And, we're, a big, trying to be a biofuels economy. So it's very interesting.
Does our economist have any projections about future fuel usage? Maybe that's a conversation for another day.
Maybe I just want to mention that in our state, we do have a lot of soybeans. So some of these type of pieces of legislation do want to just make some of the overproduction of soybean that we currently have So I don't think it's going to be a really big issue for the food prices for our state, at least, because we do have more than enough of soybean, if soybean oil is actually going to be used. But it's certainly something to consider, because even though it's a cleaner than petroleum kind of energy source, there is like this competition for water resources and for land in general. So the air pollution and all those water pollution and so on is really complicated. So we have seen, whenever I was writing my science note, that there's some research that actually says that biofuels can, at the end of the day, even emit more greenhouse emissions than fossil fuels. So it's a very complicated issue, but I wouldn't be surprised if we didn't see any impact on the food prices in our state.
I remember researching on biofuels last year before you joined the team, Eleni, and yeah, I was just looking for like that question of, if you get asked, are biofuels better for the environment in the long term than, petroleum, gas, or other alternatives? And it's really hard to find that answer. There's a lot of unknowns and a lot of, human behavior factors that go into that and how things will look in the future. So yeah, definitely a complex issue.
All right. If we don't have any more questions, I would remind people that you can type down in the comment section at the bottom if you have any questions. Maybe if we don't have any more questions, do we have any closing remarks from any of our guests today?
Well, I just want to mention, Dan, in addition to the roundtable that we have coming up, we also are doing a 3-part workshop on, an introduction to science policy. So if you are a graduate student or postdoc interested in a career in science policy, or just, trying to figure out how to be a more active citizen, we had our first session today, but you can still register. We have 2 more sessions coming up next Friday and the Friday after. I think, today's session was amazing, and I learned a lot, and I've been working in this space for quite a while now. So I think you'll learn a lot if you register and can participate in these sessions. And if you can't attend at that time, we are sharing the recording if you register. And so you still can hopefully get that information even if you can't attend live.
And I'll add too that today's session was pretty cool. I loved getting some of that information. And before you mentioned that, we did mention the vaccine hesitancy roundtable in Missouri. Come join some of Missouri's foremost researchers on that topic. And I'll show you how to sign up for each of those if I can get this off the screen. There we go. Go to mostpolicyinitiative.org. Go to Local Science Engagement Network. Click on Science Policy Workshops, and there you are. You can sign up for any one of those there up until right before the event. You'll be able to do that. So I guess if there's nothing else, no more questions, I guess we'll sign off for the weekend. Hope everybody has a great weekend, whether you're watching live or you're watching recorded. And I'm Dan English. That's Rachel Owen. That's Jenny Bratburd. And that's Dr. Elleny Bickell. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time.